Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The blade pressed against my jugular was cold, but the breath ghosting over my ear was fever-hot, smelling of mint and old blood. I didn't tremble. I stopped trembling 3 years ago when I buried my own name. But the man pinning me to the rotting floorboards wasn't just any assassin. He was the boy who had borrowed my sugar yesterday, the college student with the sunbright smile who had knocked on my door every evening for months. "I told you not to run." "Ran?" Kalen whispered, his voice stripped of its usual cheerful lilt, replaced by a dark, velvet baritone that vibrated through my chest. "I told you that you couldn't escape me. Why do you always have to make things so difficult?" To the world, I was Renjiro, a jobless 26-year-old wasting away in apartment 4B of the crumbling Lotus complex. I was a stain on the societal fabric, a man who slept until noon, wore hoodies that swallowed his frame, and survived on instant noodles and the occasional under-the-table coding gig. I was invisible, or at least I prayed I was. In reality, Renjiro didn't exist. I was a ghost forged in the brutal fires of the Viper Syndicate, a former enforcer who had committed the cardinal sin. I had developed a conscience. I had burned the ledger, emptied the accounts, and vanished into the smog of the lower city. I traded my tailored suits for thrift store rags and my silenced pistols for a life of paranoid silence. Then came Kalen. He moved into 4A 3 months ago. He was everything I wasn't: radiant, loud, and painfully alive. He looked like he belonged on a billboard for luxury watches, not in a building where the water tasted like rust. He was tall, with honey blonde hair that fell perpetually into eyes the color of polished sapphire. He claimed to be a literature student at the nearby university. He was my worst nightmare because he refused to let me be invisible. "Ran, I made too much stew again. You have to help me eat it, or it'll go to waste." That was how it started. A knock at the door. A plastic container held out by hands that looked too soft to have ever held a weapon. I had tried to slam the door in his face. I was rude. I was abrasive. I played the part of the bitter, antisocial hermit to perfection. But Kalen was like water. He seeped through every crack I tried to seal. "You look like you haven't slept in days," he'd said a week later, leaning against my doorframe, ignoring my glare. "Nightmares? Leave me alone, kid," I'd grunted, trying to push past him to get to the trash chute. He didn't move. He just smiled, a slow, lazy thing that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't a predator's smile, not then. It was the smile of someone who saw a puzzle he wanted to solve. "You know, Ren, playing hard to get only works if I'm not already interested." I froze. "I'm not playing anything. I'm telling you to fuck off. And I'm telling you that you have a bruise on your ribcage that's making you walk with a limp. Let me in. I have ice." I should have killed him then. My instincts screamed that he was too observant, too persistent. But looking into those blue eyes, I saw a terrifying innocence that I thought was real. I thought he was just a lonely rich kid slumming it for the aesthetic. I was a fool. The weeks bled into months. I dodged his flirts, parrying his advances with cynical deflections. He would leave coffee outside my door. He would accidentally bump into me at the bodega, his hand lingering on my arm a second too long, his fingers warm and firm. He was weaving a web and I, the so-called master tactician, was walking right into it because I was starving for human contact. The facade cracked on a rainy Tuesday. I had been out late, tracking a rumor that my old handlers were in the city. I'd gotten into a scuffle in an alleyway. Nothing serious, just a slash across my forearm from a junkie with a rusted knife. I wrapped it in a dark cloth and hurried back to the Lotus, keeping my head down. I was fumbling with my keys, my vision blurring slightly from blood loss, when the door to 4A opened. Kalen stood there. He wasn't wearing his usual oversized university hoodie. He was in a fitted black turtleneck, his hair slicked back. He looked older, sharper. "Ren?" His voice dropped an octave. "Go back inside, Kalen," I rasped, finally jamming the key into the lock. He was on me in a second. He didn't ask permission. He grabbed my good arm, his grip like iron, and pulled me toward his apartment. "Let go of me. You're bleeding," he stated, his tone brooking no argument. "And if you go into your filthy apartment and try to stitch that up with a sewing needle and vodka, you'll get sepsis. Get inside." I was too weak to fight him without revealing my combat training, so I let him drag me into his sanctuary. His apartment was pristine, minimalist. It smelled of expensive cologne and something sterile. He pushed me onto the leather sofa and retrieved a first aid kit that was far too professional for a literature student. As he cut away my sleeve, his movements were precise, clinical. "Who did this?" he asked softly, swabbing the wound with iodine. "Muga, elite." "Wanted my wallet." Kalen paused. He looked up, his sapphire eyes locking onto mine. There was a glimmer there, something dark and hungry. "A mugger gave you a defensive wound consistent with a Kali knife fighting style? You blocked high, Rin. An amateur would have curled up." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I watch a lot of movies." Kalen laughed, a low, breathy sound. He finished bandaging the arm and then, instead of pulling away, he leaned in. He was in my personal space, his knees between my legs as he knelt on the floor. He placed a hand on my knee, his thumb rubbing circles into the denim. "You're a terrible liar," he murmured, his face inches from mine. "But that's okay. I like a man with secrets." "What do you want from me, Kalen?" I whispered, the adrenaline mixing with a dangerous cocktail of desire. Being this close to him was intoxicating. Felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. "I want you to stop running," he said, his gaze dropping to my lips. "I want you to realize that you're not the only wolf in this building." He kissed me then. It wasn't tentative. It was acclaiming. He tasted of mint and danger. For a moment I surrendered. I let myself be the jobless nobody kissing his hot neighbor. I let myself forget the blood on my hands. But then his hand drifted to my waist, and I felt the hard outline of something beneath his sweater. A gun. A compact, silenced pistol tucked into a shoulder holster. I shoved him back, scrambling off the sofa. "Who are you?" Kalen didn't look surprised. He just sighed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. The innocence evaporated from his face, replaced by a cold, aristocratic arrogance. "I'm the man who's been keeping you alive for 3 months, Renjiro," he said, using my real name. The sound of it on his tongue was a violation. "Your syndicate," I hissed, reaching for the knife concealed in my boot. "Syndicate," Kalen scoffed, standing up slowly. "Please, do not insult me. I am Kalen Vance. My father runs the Ouroboros group." My blood ran cold. The Ouroboros, the only organization that rivaled the syndicate. They were ruthless, efficient, and they were currently at war with my former employers. "You're the heir," I realized. "The wolf of Ouroboros. And you," he stepped closer, his hands raised in a mock gesture of surrender, "are the ghost. The man who stole the encryption keys to the syndicate's offshore accounts. My father sent me to find you, retrieve the keys, and put a bullet in your brain. So why am I still breathing?" I snarled, backing toward the door. "Because," Kalen tilted his head, "I got bored. I wanted to see the legend for myself. And then you opened the door looking like a wet cat, so angry at the world. It was adorable. You played me. I studied you. There's a difference." He took another step. "And now we have a problem, because I was supposed to kill you weeks ago. But I find myself reluctant to break my favorite toy." "I'm not your toy, aren't you?" He moved with blinding speed. That brings us back to the moment on the floor. I had tried to run. I had pulled my knife, and we had crashed through the thin drywall separating the living room from the kitchen. We fought, a vicious, intimate tangle of limbs and strikes. He was stronger, younger, but I had experience. I had almost pinned him, but my injured arm gave out, and he capitalized on the weakness. Now he straddled my waist, my own knife pressed to my throat. "This is the part where you beg," Kalen whispered, his eyes dilated. Go to hell, I spat. Kalen grinned. I'm already there, darling. Suddenly, the glass of the balcony window shattered inward. Kalen threw himself off me, rolling behind the kitchen island just as a hail of bullets shredded the floorboards where we had been lying a second ago. I scrambled behind the overturned sofa, heart pounding. Who is that? I shouted over the ringing in my ears. My family, Kalen yelled back, checking the magazine of his pistol. I missed my check-in. They assume I've failed or turned traitor. They're here to clean up. You check in every day? Hourly. You possessive psychopath. Focus, Ren. We can argue about my attachment style later. Right now, we have 6 heavily armed cleaners coming through the door. I looked at him. The man who had been sent to kill me was now the only thing standing between me and death. The irony was bitter like bile. Why didn't you kill me? I asked, my voice cutting through the silence as the shooting paused. Kalen looked at me across the debris-strewn room. There was no mask now. No flirtatious neighbor, no arrogant air. Just a man looking at the only thing in the world he wanted. Because you're the only one who sees me, he said. Everyone sees the air. You saw the annoying neighbor. You treated me like a person, even if you hated me. I can't let them take that. He tossed me a spare gun, sliding it across the floor. Do you trust me? I picked up the weapon, checking the weight. Felt familiar. Felt like coming home. No, I said, meeting his gaze. But I'll kill with you. The front door exploded inward. We moved in sync, as if we had been partners for years instead of enemies. I took the left, he took the right. The Ouroboros cleaners were professionals, clad in tactical gear, but they weren't expecting resistance. They were expecting an execution. I dropped 2 with double taps to the chest, sliding over the kitchen counter. Kalen was a whirlwind of violence. He didn't just shoot. He moved like a dancer, using the environment, throwing a boiling pot of water from the stove into a man's face before shooting him. Behind you, I screamed. Kalen ducked without looking, and I put a bullet in the forehead of the man, aiming a shotgun at his back. Nice shot, neighbor. Kalen laughed, a maniacal sound amidst the carnage. We fought back to back in the center of the ruined living room. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic tang of blood. My injury was screaming, my vision swimming, but the adrenaline kept me upright. The last man fell gurgling by the door. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. I slumped against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. Kalen stood amidst the bodies, his chest heaving. He looked at the carnage, then at me. He walked over, kicking a gun away from a dead man's hand, and knelt before me. He reached out, his hand hovering over my face. I didn't flinch this time. He wiped a smear of blood from my cheek with his thumb. We have to leave, he said quietly. My father will send more. The syndicate will hear about this. We are enemies of the state, enemies of the underworld. You destroyed your life for me, I said, trying to understand the logic. You had everything. Power. Money. I was a bird in a gilded cage, Kalen said, his eyes soft. You were the only interesting thing that ever happened to me. Besides, he leaned in, his lips brushing against my ear. I never said I gave up on my mission. I just changed the parameters. What parameters? I'm not going to kill you, Ran, he whispered, biting lightly on my earlobe, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. I'm going to keep you. You're mine now. No one else gets to hunt you. No one else gets to hurt you. If the world wants you, they have to go through me. I looked at him, beautiful, bloody, and completely unhinged. I should have been terrified. I should have put the gun to his head and ended it. But as I looked at the devastation around us, at the lengths he had gone to just to keep playing this twisted game with me, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want him to stop. I reached out, grabbing him by the back of his neck, and pulled him down into a bruising kiss. It tasted of violence and survival. It was a seal on a pact written in blood. If you try to cage me, Kalen, I murmured against his lips, I will kill you. Kalen smiled, and this time, it was the truest thing I had ever seen. I'm counting on it, sweetheart. Now let's go. We have an empire to burn. We walked out of the apartment, stepping over the bodies of the life we were leaving behind, hand in hand, into the darkness that awaited us. And that is how the exile claimed the prince, turning a hunter into a shield. If you enjoyed seeing Kalen burn his inheritance for the sake of obsession, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you trust a lover who started as your assassin? Or would you sleep with one eye open? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,